I think most people stop too early. Not because they're weak, not because they're incapable, not because they don't have the potential, but because they stop in a part where things feel messy or incomplete. The part where the results are not obvious yet. The part where the progress feels slow, almost non existent. And in this phase, you can sometimes think, well, is progress actually being made? You can feel tired and frustrated and wondering, what the hell are you even doing? I'm sure many people can relate to this. I think this applies to pretty much everything you do in life, whether it's creating artwork, whether it's training, whether it's business, YouTube, whether it's your career, relationships, fitness, rebuilding your life. Most people don't quit at the very beginning. At the beginning, there's excitement, anticipation, motivation, inspiration, and a new goal, essentially, a new plan, a new routine, a new version of yourself that you're chasing. And it's in the middle where things become uncomfortable. I think it's when the work starts to feel repetitive, when the results are not obvious, when nobody is clapping. The middle is where you're building the thing, but it still doesn't look like what you have in mind. Then ultimately, I think this is where a lot of people stop. They stop before painting starts coming together. They stop before business starts to generate money. They stop before the channel starts growing. They stop before they've reached the next rut on the ladder of their career. They exit the relationship because it's not quite got to where they expected it to get to. They stop before confidence comes back. And I think ultimately the frustrating thing is that a lot of the time you can be a lot closer than what you actually think. When you're in the middle or when you're at the back end of the middle, you could be just literally a week or two away from seeing some results that would keep you going in that phase. And today for me, for example, painting this here, I had a bit of one of those moments where, I've already worked a busy shift at work this morning, hot as hell outside. It's like 31 degrees. I'm delivering shopping in a sweaty van with no air conditioning. So it's physically exhausting work, Come home, physically tired, and normally I might do about 45 minutes to an hour's worth of painting, and I genuinely feel quite good for doing that most of the times when I paint. But today I thought, well, I need to start pushing the envelope on these painting sessions. When I was younger, I remember painting for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours sometimes straight. But this takes, you have to build up that endurance. It's like running, essentially. Before you can do something for a long time, you have to actually build the endurance. And I thought today, well, I've been building the endurance, let's test it. And I thought, well, I'll push the envelope to about 2 or 3 hours. I'll stay with the painting for 2 or 3 hours, and I did. And it moved the painting forward properly. It moved it to a good position. It's at a point now where 1 or 2 more passes, it will be complete. And I didn't do this because suddenly I'm more talented or because everything felt easy. I just stayed past the point where I would normally stop. And I think on reflection, how many things in life would probably change if we just stayed with them for a little bit longer. And going back to my earlier point, you could be a couple of weeks away. Just say if you're training in the gym, just say you've started going to the gym, or whatever it is, you're learning a new language. You could be a couple of weeks away from actually feeling like you've reached a point of results, which would then keep you going further and bring you to a phase of completion. And I think ultimately the middle makes you compare constantly. The middle makes you doubt yourself. The middle makes you think, well, maybe the plan is wrong, maybe the goal is impossible. And how many breakthroughs do you think are just sitting just past the point where people usually quit? Someone could be on the cusp of changing the entire world, but they just stop. And it's because of that middle phase, the doubt that comes in. You know, the middle makes you think, well, maybe I'm actually not good enough. I think most of the time you probably don't need a new goal. You don't need a new plan. You don't need to start again. Sometimes you do. You don't need to stop, making goals. You just need to stop leaving too early. You need to stay with the training, stay with the habit, stay with the painting, stay with the business. You know, some people say it takes 7 to 10 years for a business to actually start generating a livable income or to start working. You know, stay with the boring work that is slowly turning you into something or someone different, because progress is often very quiet before it becomes obvious. You know, and I think if you quit before something, if you quit every time something feels unclear or a bit messy, you never get to actually see what it could have become. You know, and I'm not just saying, you know, bang your head against the wall for the rest of your life. You should be seeing bits of progress, but it isn't going to come all at once, and the middle is going to be very unclear at times. And I have to remind myself of this constantly, because I've got many things going on where I'm kind of in the middle of it, you know. You don't necessarily always need more motivation, you just sometimes need more patience, essentially. You don't always need the best conditions, sometimes you just need to stay with the work long enough, even when the conditions are not good. You know, you don't always need a completely different life. You just sometimes need to keep building what you've already started. And, you know, I think a lot of people go wrong here. They just think, oh, well, stuff it, I'm just going to go back to doing what we're doing. But what I would say, the overarching message, I think, of the video is that if there's something you've been working on, something you care about, something you know that matters to you, don't just stop because it looks messy. Don't stop because you're in the middle. Don't stop because nobody else can see it yet. The breakthrough is often on the other side of the moment that you stop, essentially. So, yeah, most people stop too early. Don't be one of them. I'm Jake O'Neill. You've been watching Jake O'Neill UK. Hope to see you in the next one.